We've got, we're trying to begin to ease our own lockdown now. Mr. Innocent Chukwuma joins us in the studios this morning. He's the Regional Director of West Africa for Ford Foundation. Good to see you again today.
Thank you, Chamberlain.
And we also do have in Abuja, Joshua Kabela, who is a former DIG of police. He joins us from there, so he'll be getting his views as well. Good morning, Mr. Kabela. Thank you for joining us as well today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's start with you, Mr. Chukwuma. So many questions about policing. A couple of days ago, we spoke to the CP in Edo State about what to expect. Well, yeah, I mean, he couldn't give details, and rightly so, about how the investigation is playing itself out. But then there are questions as to, look, do we actually have a lot of the required infrastructure to carry out this investigation without any Nigerian having doubts as to the results that they get?
Yeah, I think when it comes to rape, we actually need to be a bit more expansive in appreciating how we got to where we are now before the role of investigation, perhaps in controlling it. I think one thing that is clear is that rape in Nigerian society is an epidemic that has gotten out of hand due to criminal negligence by various authority figures in the lives of young girls and women in society. And these authority figures range from families that, because of family sense of shame, will not report. It includes traditional, cultural, religious, educational institutions and leaders that, because of social norms or whatever, will not sanction those who are involved in this. And above all, includes government, organs of government, such as the legislature, that have not passed the enabling law. Right now, we have insufficient and inconsistent legal framework for dealing with this. And then you're also the courts, that when cases come to them, because of the narrow nature of the legal framework, perpetrators end up going free. And then, of course, the executive arm and its agencies like police and the others that have failed it. So we have to look at it in this holistic nature and respond to it in that way to begin to push the needle on this issue. Now, coming down to investigation and police, it speaks to lack of institutional capacity to deal with this phenomenon. And institutional capacity begins with a specialized unit handling with this matter. It includes the kind of training that they receive. It includes the resourcing of investigation. It includes the duty of care and, above all, political will. So before things degenerate at the level of investigation, which is the officer that is deployed to respond to this, it has failed across areas that I've just mentioned. And you have to tackle it in that way to begin to see where the problems lie.
Well, there are many issues to take on from what you have just said now about the opening parts of what you said. I have a lot of questions about that. But let me, first of all, quickly take it to Mr. Kabila concerning the institutional capacity that you talked about. Well, I don't know what your take is on what you've heard Mr. Chukwuma said about the institutional capacity of the police to manage these cases of assault against women especially.
Okay, I would rather want to say that rape or sexual abuse on women and other vulnerable children is as a result of our norm. The societal norm has degenerated, and the police is also saddled with a lot of challenges of ensuring security all over the country. And so rape is a crime that's stigmatized, and it's a crime that do not give warning. And so you wouldn't know at what point or when somebody could rape. And so the law enforcement will only react when it has happened. The preventive measures is not with the police. The police may not be able to create a situation where they prevent rape or sexual abuses because there's no warning signs. And so it is the societal norms that create and throw up these challenges. And so when we talk about capacity, of course, there are things that are needed, like training and like provision of classical and modern scene of crime equipments that police could use to preserve some of those evidence, because the evidences are very important. And packing evidences in a rape situation, you need to have special equipment to do that. And so the police could function more than this if some of these things are given. But it is not a crime that announced itself. It happened unnoticed. And so it is about the societal norms. It's about who we are and what can we do, to ensure that some of these things are taken off our society.
Mr. Abila, just one moment. I think you said two things now that I'd like you to kind of clear, because I'm not sure whether you are saying that the police is overwhelmed, too overwhelmed to give attention to this kind of cases, or that the police is ill-equipped, because you said they will need certain special skills or special tools to be able to track crimes that are gender-based or sexual in nature. Kindly clear that. Are you saying the police is too overwhelmed to deal with this? I mean, they have so many security issues to deal with that, this one, they may not really be able to deal with it, or that they do not have enough skills or tools to deal with them?
No. What I'm imputing is that the crime of sexual abuse does not have warning signs. You won't know who will rape and who is likely to be the victim. Like any other crime that you see clearly that some people are planning to commit. And so one, police wouldn't know who is preparing to commit rape or to abuse a child or whatever it is. That is what I'm saying. And so when it happened, the police usually react after the crime has been committed, because there are no warning signs. That's what I'm saying. And so when you are reacting to a situation, then it does not become preventive. You cannot be preventive because you wouldn't know who next the victim would be or who is likely to be a person that has the threats of sexual abuse. Two, I say again that when police react and go to scene of crime, the ordinary things, the things we use in gathering evidence in some other crimes, are not the same tools that you will use.
Let me jump in there, Mr. Habila. The thing about that is this.
You should...
I hope you can hear me, though. The approach is very important as well, because it does that then, because listening to you, I mean, there are those who could think that, wait a minute, does the police approach this in the same way they approach every other crime? That will be a challenge, because, I mean, because there are those who believe that part of the reasons that this continues to happen, if not much more important than the previous point, is because of the attitude of the police to some of these matters. When people come up and report to the police, the way the police respond to them clearly shows that, look, who will want to come out and report if the police is handling it in this manner? So isn't that a contributing factor that we need to address headlong?
I agree with you. I agree with you that even as it is now, I don't think it has changed when we leave the stage. Is that a lot of people shy away, is stigmatized. A lot of people shy away from reporting these cases. And when they report these cases, there are other relations that will also discourage them from not appearing. I'm talking reality, that it becomes difficult. Sometimes the police officers want to quickly go into this, and people are dragging their feet because people don't want to be identified with the issue of rape, that have been raped, have been abused. People look at it as one of those things that they shouldn't pursue. Up till now, in most society, people don't come out to report and then to follow up these cases. We have a lot of issues with investigation and prosecution. And so I want to say that that the police, there's a gap. I agree that there should be more training and there should be more provision for equipment. When there's a rape, you need to take the two victims. once it is reported, you need to scrub the semen that is on the body of the rapist and the victim, and you need to package it very well and send it to the scientific lab for investigation.
Let me bring in Mr. Chukwuma here as well.
Prosecution.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you in a moment, but what do you think about, look, this, you spoke about a number of things, the mindset of the policing. You may glean a thing or two from what he said about that, how they approach some of these things. What's your impression of this?
I think he actually spoke to a fundamental problem within the Nigerian police force in relation to dealing with specialized crime like this, which is this general duty orientation. So when he says rape is a crime that doesn't give notice, it means you're dealing with an institution where there is no specialized unit handling this issue that are trained, equipped, and ready, just like you have agencies like disaster management agencies that know that disaster can happen at any time, and then they are prepared to respond to it. And this is something we've been talking about over the years, the need for the police to have specialized unit, not just specialized in names, but with the necessary training, with the necessary equipment. In the case of rape, here he talked about, rape kits and all of that. All that are required. And then, of course, the investigation itself, financing it. I mean, if you go to any typical case of a rape victim, the police will respond, but then they need transportation to go to follow up on the leads if the victim or the family are not ready to fund those. That's the end of the investigation.
And the area of the House of Reps, pardon me, where isn't this where they come in saying, listen, we've seen the structure of the Nigerian police force. If we say all of this and just talk about amending our laws without some specifics, we may just be papering over cracks. You will not achieve the kind of results you want. So some time ago, I mean, when the conversation about state policing or not comes to bear, isn't this the area that we should think and say, listen, what do we really want to do? Are we sincere about addressing this problem? If we are, should we then say, look, let's create a specialized unit backed by law to look at these kind of matters and provide certain specifics for them? Because if we do that and leave it under the police, the overarching mindset or the attitude of the police may eventually overshadow this, and we're back to square one.
Precisely. That's why in my opening statement, I laid out a number of role players that needed to be involved if we want to adopt a holistic approach of this. It's not just the police alone. The legislature itself, has to play their role. Right now, we have, it's only in the Federal Capital Territory that is governed by this Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act that you have an expansive definition of rape that includes orifices. The extant law in the states, which is a criminal code in the south and the penal code in the north, has a very narrow definition, which is unlawful carnal knowledge of women, either by force or threat of force. But in the case of the VAP in Abuja, which is the national law, it has a more expansive. So the states has to expand their own laws to include this. Even in places like Lagos, where marital rape is not recognized as crime in Lagos State. And then in the VAP Act itself, the agency is recognized to intervene on this, to actually house the VAP, is a NAPTIP. NAPTIP, which is primarily preoccupied with trafficking and all of that. So this may be seen as an added responsibility. So in that act, if it had recommended or provided for the establishment of an agency, it could be within the police, but then it should be named and then also go on to provide what they need to have to function effectively. I think it would go a long way in addressing it. But then we also need the larger society because it's a social crime. And when you have social norms, when you have social silence, as we're seeing, underpinned by social norms, whose gatekeepers have very conservative understanding of norms. When you go to traditional authorities to report, they will rather want to resolve it within their court. This is something that will bring shame to the family and the community, and will not bring external law enforcement agents to deal with it.
Isn't that going to eventually fizzle out if the people see that, well, justice is not just being done, but it's seen to have been done by the mechanisms, the institutions that were put in place? If the law says this is what the law is, well, your norms and everything can say one or the other thing, but the law is the law.
It doesn't work that way. You know, in Nigeria, we actually have two publics. We have the civic publics that you and I in the urban centers respond to. But in rural areas where majority of Nigerians live, the traditional institutions and the traditional norms and regulations are actually the ones that govern their life. So for police to even go to a community, certain communities, to arrest somebody, they must first report to the house of the traditional ruler in that area. So we have Nigerian state has not succeeded in expanding its control over the territory.
I get that point, but what I'm trying to say is that not that we will not have any regard for all those traditional processes, but yes, you can respect those ones, but ultimately aimed at respecting what the law says about a specific case. Look at process of corruption, for instance. It doesn't matter who you are, traditional ruler or not. If you are guilty of such, law is a law about corruption. Even if people think, oh, yeah, you're in that position, you should come back with something home. The law is a law in that regard.
The law is the law, but we've also seen, I think it's actually in relation to Lagos State here, where a former governor, I won't mention the name, the EFCC went to his house in a community. The youth in that area mobilized and made it difficult for them to. But I'm not saying that these institutions are untouchable. They need to be held accountable for all of this. So when you are dealing with traditional settings, it's not just the individuals. It's also the gatekeepers in those communities that tolerate and sanction these violations that need to be held personally accountable, and then elevate the voices of change agents among them who are working as we'll expect them to work, having progressive interpretation of what is tolerable and what is not tolerable. You can't hide under marital or other traditional institutions to perpetuate crimes like rape.
There is something you said about, you know, the moral laws, the earlier part of your conversation. We'll come to that one. But let me take on Mr. Habila on one of the things that you mentioned earlier. When you talked about specialized, you know, teams to handle these special cases. Mr. Abila, we have special anti-robbery squad. We have special units of the police assigned for certain, you know, special crimes. Don't you see it as about time that we had a special team in the police to handle this kind of a case that we are talking about, sexual and gender-based violence?
Yes, I want to let you know that if you go to the police headquarters in the various states and the area command, and of course here in Abuja, we are likely to meet a team. There's a team that is responsible for taking up cases of sexual abuse. And they have records to show that they've been on that. I would rather say that it should be strengthened and properly equipped to be able to do this investigation. But better still, I say again, that a lot of victims and their relations do not want to pursue some of these cases, even in the cities, because it's stigmatized. They don't want to see a situation where the victim is let open and everybody is aware that this is a person that has been sexually abused. It is the NGOs, non-governmental organizations that we have that are putting their feet on the ground, that whoever does or commit that kind of crime must be properly brought before the court and be made to answer the charges. This is what I think it's happening right now. So I'm telling you exactly what it is. But we have. It could be strengthened.
I'm a little confused here. Just one moment. Just one moment. I'm a little confused here. But you said earlier that, you know, in your earlier submission before we came back to Lagos, that, you know, that there is a need for training and retraining of police officers who are already engaged you know, with general duties, that sometimes these are the same people that are told to go and handle special cases such as gender and sexual-based violence. But for you to now tell us that there are already established special teams, well, that's a little confusing. However, is it that same team that usually asks people for mobilization before they get anything done from the reports that we're having?
Remember, I said the headquarters and of the Commissioner of Police in the various states, and I also did say that at the force headquarters, where we have the CID, the investigator, you have them. But in the rural area that you have a division, you are just likely to have those ones. But those ones cannot be well trained because these ones are charged with the responsibility of day-to-day checking of crime and response to distress call and response to crime that has been committed. So I say again that these units that we've already had could be strengthened. Those who ask for mobilization are the odd ones among the police. It is not everyone, or it is not a norm for police to ask for mobilization. But we do have a lot of them where that could happen, but that is not the norm.
I'm pretty sure that you are not hearing this for the first time, and I'm also certain that the police system has been aware of this for so many years, you know, that whenever people go to the police station, some men of the police will be asking them for one thing or the other to be able to do their jobs. If that is correct, and this fact is known to the system, and as you have said, it is not the norm, what is being done about that? Because, as my colleague said the other time, if justice is delayed, it is denied.
Okay, yeah, I want to agree with you, and I want to be frank about this issue. Those that are identified for doing what they are doing, a lot of them have been removed out of the system. We have a well-detailed procedure in the Nigerian police for punishment that leads to even dismissal and prosecution. The thing is that I'm sure if you have time to check, you will see that such people, when found, are not left. But it does happen. And a lot of them actually do some of these things like that.
To break, but we'll come back to both of you when we return in a moment. Stay with us. So there you go. Many will be looking to see what is he going to do next if things don't improve. Will he put his money where his mouth is and resign? Just a minute before we go to that point. You were going to respond to what the DIG was talking about.
Yeah, so he asked the question, how come we say Nigerian police is characterized by general duty policing, and then you also have specialized agencies like anti-robbery and all of that. Yeah. So the challenge is in the personnel. So rather than have people who are focused and dedicated to these agencies and are trained and build expertise over time, they are simply moved from one. So you can be doing a robbery today, tomorrow you are moved to investigate a sexual crime, the next day you are moved. So you don't really have career expectations that over a period of time, you will become an expert in this area.
So there is no specialty, essentially.
Precisely. The only one who has attempted to build that expertise is the one we all know, KRA, who has headed anti-robbery operations of federal special anti-robbery for years. And you could see how effective he is. But for the bulk of other police officers, you are simply moved. I mean, the average DPO, 2 or 3 years in a place, the person is moved, and they are moved like that.
Does that mean that we do not give this kind of SB, sexual and gender-based violence, does that mean that we don't give it that credence? Does that mean we consider it's not that important?
No, I mean, even in special and all the so-called specialized agencies, you don't have the personnel in them building a career out of those specializations.
But that means then there is no system intention.
Precisely, because of general duty. You know, various investigation panels, including presidential panels of police reforms in Nigeria, have recommended that on recruitment, a police officer should stay general duty for 5 years. And after that, be posted to a particular area based on the person's competence and expertise to build a career out of it, but it has not happened. Then the other one is the question you asked, he responded that, oh, if you have cases where police officers demanded money from families to investigate a case that they have had to deal with. But the fundamental question is the average police station, what budget do they have to fund this investigation? The average police station in Nigeria hardly gets up to 50,000 naira in a month. And in a place like Lagos where crimes are reported by the minute, who funds it when the budget does not provide for it? So actually it's not a crime on those. It's actually, for me, it's a height of commitment to their duty that they are actually focusing on these cases. Because in many other areas, including where some of us work, we simply throw our hands up in the air. We have no budget to do this. But in the police, they are not allowed to do that.
Well, you know, Lagos is going to be starting community policing. They put in place a committee headed by the Oba of Lagos to look into that. But the comments being made by the member in the House of Representatives about funding, that he will resign if things don't improve. So it appears as though, look, it's gone that bad. I mean, you just wonder sometimes, why does it appear as though these challenges are not being addressed headlong?
It's funded. I mean, we are all excited. Oh, they are appointing a community policing committee. They will also appoint community policing officer. But from inception, it was said that these people will not be paid. They are special constables. And you and I know the average person who is barely scrapping a living to go and dedicate himself or herself to this task that is life and death without being paid. What kind of service will the person do? So it all goes back to funding. You know, we have developed over the years what they call this envelope allocation. Whatever you are given, whatever you see in the envelope, whether it addresses your problem or not, you take it. And for many, they've also developed a practice. Okay, you give us an envelope. Whatever that envelope will meet, we leave it at that. So there's actually no proper costing of what it requires to police average police station. Under the Nigerian policing program by the British High Commission, they attempted to develop what they call an annual policing plan at various levels, divisional area and state. And then with that annual policing plan, you develop an annual budget. And the expectation is that that budget will be funded. But it's not funded. When it gets to allocation, you are given an envelope to go back and prey on your community to raise the resources to do the work.
This is going to be a huge challenge. But let's bring in Mr. Habila as well on this. Is that the same thing for you in terms of these challenges and whether or not we can succeed doing things the way they are at the moment?
Yes, my colleague have said it all. It is, we need to have a rethink. Number one, we need to look at the holistic of this, particularly the rape that I said. Our society should insist that anybody that is a victim and then the perpetrators of this crime, people should be encouraged to stand up and pursue and be ready to give evidence and be ready to take this up from the beginning to the end. We should also ask the law. The law should be revisited, and punishment for them should be matched and then looked at, so that some of the things that people would ordinarily do will not do them again if the punishment is reviewed and punishment commensurate with the offense. Remember that one National Assembly member, one Ross Oko from Cross River, once proposed a bill that the punishment of death should be meted to those who even rape minors and young children. But that did not see the light of the day.
All right, let me bring it back here. I thought that under, if I remember properly, IGP Arase's time, I think it was in conjunction with Ford Foundation, there was a gender-based unit in the police. Professor Konofa drove that procedure. What happened to that?
It's funding. After the funding period by Ford ended, there was no follow-up. And right now, we're also in the middle of consulting with partners to support the launching of a campaign against rape, which will lead to some assistance. But we can't run a police force by donation. There should be own resources. Development assistance agencies can only play catalytic role, to show what it looks like when it is done. But once those pilots are completed, they are supposed to be sustained and scaled. And that is where we have had a perennial crisis in Nigeria, that we don't have the resource commitment to do this work. But then you have resources to replace chairs, to replace vehicles, just fund things that are not really important at the end of the day. But the real assignment, the real project that they are expected to do across institutions, it's not just the police. You don't have the budget. So
let's wind down with this. What about that class of community policing called, I think they call it problem-oriented policing?
Again, each IG comes in and have his own program, and then christened it in some way. It's actually to the credit of this current IG that he returned to the original concept of community policing. But the predecessors will simply come. If you remember, Tafa Balogun launched it in 2004. Ehindere, who came the next year, changed it to serve and to protect with integrity. The succeeding police IG had his own name. But it's all in a bid to say, oh, in my administration, I launched it. Forgetting that sustainability is what counts at the end of the day. It's what will lead to results. That this IG came, launched this program, another one came, scraps it, and launches his own. It gives impetus for the succeeding one to do equally the same thing. And then that's where legal framework comes up. Don't forget, we still have a police act that was enacted by the British colonial government in 1943. So all the reforms have no legal framework for their sustenance, which means any IG can come and launch his own problem and claiming lack of institutional memory or the direction he or she wants to go.
What's in the name, you might then ask? Or that Innocent Chukwuma, who is the Regional Director, West Africa for Ford Foundation, as well as Mr. Joshua Kabila, retired DIG for the police operations. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on today.